titled, Women Who Gave a Creep a Chance. How Did It Go? Story 1. I ignored my gut feeling about him, overlooked his strange tendencies, and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. We were together for almost 2 years. The entire relationship, he added girls he didn't even know on Snapchat and would say rather inappropriate things to them. Being that you know nothing about strangers on that app, I'm now aware that one of the girls was a minor. He was 26. On my 22nd birthday, he had invited my best friend to sleep in our bed with us, and the first time he met my sister, he gave her the same invitation. He gave both of those invitations right in front of my face. When we were out together and he saw someone attractive, he wouldn't just glance, he stared. He regularly talked shit on my family and is just generally an awful person. I was his first real girlfriend, and he was extremely self-centered and mentally abusive. That ended almost a year ago. He still goes to our regular hangouts and asks about me, when I come in, where I'm living, who I'm seeing, etc. My takeaway from that whole situation is, always trust your gut feeling about people. Story 2. There was a guy that came into my work restaurant a few times a week for lunch. He did this for a little over a month, so he became a regular. He had asked me out every time I brought his bill. He always asked in a lighthearted way and never seemed upset or anything when I turned him down. I assumed that after the first few asks, he maybe thought of it as more of an inside joke at that point. Like he was just asking now to make light of the previous rejections and to make it less awkward or something. He always gave me weird vibes, but seemed nice enough, so I thought I might have just been making assumptions because of his appearance and wasn't being fair. One time that he asked, I decided randomly to agree and give him a shot. Why not? I thought. He was always super kind, and I had gotten rather used to the awkwardness I felt being around him. He seemed so excited, and I asked him to leave his number on the receipt, and I would text him when I wasn't busy to set something up. So it wasn't really much of a joke to keep asking me out. I mostly figured that, though. Ugh. A few days later, I hadn't texted him yet to set anything up or even give him my number, and I get a text only a few min after walking into my house after I got home from work. It said, "Hey, it's from... I know it's a long shot, but I'm free tonight and bored. Want to hang out? If you're free, that is." I asked him how he got my number. He said I gave it to him the night I agreed. I absolutely know I didn't. I got really creeped out, but decided not to confront him about it and just play like I'm a ditz and believed that I must have done that. I just didn't remember because it was busy. I told him that I wasn't free to hang out that night, that I was going to be working later to help cover a shift, and then would be pretty pooped by the time I was off. I only ever saw him come in for lunch, not ever dinner shifts. A few minutes passed before he responded. He said, "Why are you lying to me?" I just responded with, "What? Lol." He said, "I know you are home. If you didn't want to hang out tonight, you could have just said so." Alarm bells rang in my head. I thought, there's no way he's outside my house. He is just trying to call my bluff. Creepy, but not a full-blown stalker. But I felt exposed. I felt the crawling on my skin that only burns into you when someone is staring at you. The vulnerable pulses that are felt only by prey. I looked out through the blinds of my bedroom and he was parked right outside my house. I could see his face lit up by the phone screen. He was so close. I texted him and said, "Ahaha, you caught me. How did you know I was bluffing? I'm sorry. I do want to hang out soon. I'm just not feeling up to it tonight." And called 911. The police showed up and went up to his car and talked to him for a bit. He drove away a few minutes later, and then the officers came to my door. They told me that they acted like a random neighbor complained about a strange car. They didn't implicate anyone, but made it seem like it was an older person, so probably not me. They took his plate information, but asked him politely to move so he didn't upset anyone in the neighborhood, and he complied. I went to my friend's house that night and filed a restraining order the next morning. I later found out that he most likely got my number from the shift sheet behind the hostess counter, because several coworkers had seen him, at different times, snooping back there, and kindly stopped him. He, I guess, grabbed a roll of silverware, claiming that the server hadn't left him any, and he didn't want to bother anyone because he knew they were busy, so just grabbed it himself. This stopped anyone from suspecting him of anything odd. And that his car had been parked at my house almost every night, neighbor's security camera. I don't know how he got my address, but I assume he must have followed me. He must have been full-on stalking me for a while. He did come into my work a day or two later for lunch, acting like everything was normal. I immediately went and got my manager, and she informed him that he had a restraining order against him, preventing him from eating there because he would be in violation of it. I had already changed my phone number, so I don't know if he tried to text me, and I didn't sleep at my house for weeks, but I never saw him again after that. And I often find myself thinking back to that time and wondering how much more did he do, and for how long that I don't know about. Like, maybe he stalked me long before he started coming into the restaurant, and only started coming in there because he felt more brave than before to interact with me. How much of my private moments throughout my life were actually not private? Also, I have never once stopped feeling scared that he might have still stalked me and knows where I am even now, but is keeping himself hidden. I doubt it, but the fear is still there. I have never felt comfortable being alone. Ever. Most of this would have still probably happened even if I didn't agree to give him a chance. But if he hadn't slipped up about having my phone number when he shouldn't, I would have gone out somewhere with him, and who knows how badly that could have ended. Story 3, I agreed to go on a date with a guy. He seemed nice enough, and he appeared to have his shit together. After an hour at the pub, I was getting some red flags, and I said I needed to make a move, and he walked me to my car. He then got in my car with me and begged me to go back to his. I politely declined at first, but he wasn't getting out, so I started to get more scared. After about 20 minutes of insisting I come back to his, I was terrified. So I secretly text my mate to call me with an emergency. 5 seconds later, she called and said she got stuck in a puddle and needed my help. I love this girl. So I told him I really needed to go, and after getting quite angry, he finally got out and slammed my car door. Unfortunately, I went on another date a year later with a different guy, and again, he got in my car and tried to kiss me. I just leant on my horn, wound my windows down, and screamed like a crazy person. Luckily, he got the message and left swiftly. Guys, please don't just get in the girl's car. It's creepy and scary AF. Story 4. He secretly made a copy of my house key and would let himself in while I was at work to read my diary. Story 5. Back in high school, several of my female friends and I, also female, had an off period before lunch, so we were all sitting around a table chatting. One of the female security guards came up to us and told me that there was a new exchange student from Amsterdam that thought I was cute, but he was too nervous to come over and introduce himself. I have zero interest in men, but I figured there wasn't any harm in letting the guy come sit with us and helping him feel more comfortable at our school. So he comes over, sits down with us, and chats a bit. He seemed rather shy, and he had about a dozen piercings going up each arm that he kept fiddling with, and a bunch of facial piercings. Then class lets out, and people, including a bunch of my male friends, start showing up for lunch. First male friend sits down and introduces himself. New guy doesn't not respond at all, doesn't even look at friend. Weird. Maybe just shy? Second male friend comes and sits down. Same thing. Slightly unsettling now. We kept trying to include him over lunch, but he would only respond to the women. Wouldn't even acknowledge the other guys at the table. I never talked to him again after that lunch period, and 2 weeks later, he got expelled for slamming a girl against a locker and choking her to the point she nearly passed out. Story 6. Guy had serious untreated mental health problems, which resulted in him spending 4 years stalking me and making me resent giving that one chance. I made multiple calls to police and paramedics because he would call me up threatening suicide unless I would help him. He still finds me on social medias and random gaming apps to say, "Hi, I miss you," but I now live more than 1,000 kilometers away. Story 7. Met him when I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. Wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had zero real dating experience. Agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I didn't have a romantic interest. He became convinced he was Gatsby, and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. Started stalking me and endlessly sending letters and gifts to me at work, describing how we were fated to be together. When I confronted him to stop, he started having his friends follow me at work or drop by to check in on me. Prowled outside on nights I had to close shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and things fizzled. 7 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same dude. He just got released from a short prison sentence and was letting me know he thought of me every day and was going to find me so we could finally be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone indefinitely. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again. Story 8. Did one video chat with him during which he asked if he could call me again later in the day. When I told him no, I'll be busy, I started getting random text messages throughout my day that said, "Are you okay? Just let me know you're okay." The first I responded to, I said, "Hey, yeah, I'm fine. I just hung up with you 30 minutes ago, bud." He took that as a sign that I wanted to talk more, so he attempted another video call. When I didn't respond, he started again with the texts. Didn't even bother responding to the rest. Up to 20 unread messages later before I was able to block him while leaving him on read. Story 9. He got very obsessed with me. I had to be straight up rude to get him to leave me alone because he wouldn't understand when I asked nicely. He later self-harmed on his own wrists and went around telling people to ask me why he did that. Edit, might be relevant, but I was 17 and he was 26. Story 10. Knew he was weird before the first date. I was sad and thought maybe he'd be different in person. Showed up to the date and he walked with a crazy limp, told me he was into peace stuff, wouldn't pay for dinner, tried to kiss me 3 times. When I got home that night, he sent me a full-body nude completely out of the blue. I never saw him again. He texted me 3 months later to tell me I was the worst human and most selfish person he's ever met, and then he blocked me. Story 11. Went on a first date for just drinks with a guy, and red flags were immediate. Didn't look anything like his profile, and got handsy almost as soon as we sat down. I wasn't into him at all, but we had a shared interest in horror novels, so I decided to extend the date into dinner. During dinner, he drank several old fashions while I nursed a single beer. He then told me he thought we were soulmates, and he thought we were going to fall in love. He also told me his ex-girlfriend was going to get an abortion the next day. At the end of the date, his portion of the bill was significantly more than my portion because of all his drinks, but he asked me to pay half, which I did. On top of that, he gave me shit for driving to the date, even though it was only a mile from my house. I didn't want to walk in hot weather in my nice date dress, and I had twisted my ankle earlier that week. But even after giving me shit for driving, he asked me to give him a lift home, which I did. Once we were in front of his place, he refused to get out of my car unless I went inside with him for a nightcap. I said absolutely not. He begged me to just enjoy a drink on his front porch. I said no. I told him to get out of my car. He finally did. The next day, he texted me telling me that was the best date he'd ever had and he couldn't wait to see me again. I told him no thank you and walked away with one lesson learned. I need to just say no from the beginning. Story 12. This guy was handsome, but way too into me for knowing nothing about me. It wasn't like when we spoke, I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would lead me to want to share info with him. This was not a, I feel like I've known this man forever connection. I just thought this was normal dating, but had a gut feeling something was off. He talked to me like I'd been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates, never even had sex. After third date, I had made my decision based on our short time getting to know one another and let him know I had no interest in continuing to date and that I didn't see us being compatible long term. He then locked me in his car, proceeded to ask if I wanted to move to California with him, WTF, and started crying/begging me to work this out. I tried to be very nice, but it got to the point I was scared and wasn't sure how this was going to go since he was virtually a stranger. So I hit his dashboard and said if he didn't let me out of the car immediately, I was calling the police. Then he threatened to kill himself if I didn't spend the night with him at his house. I'd never even been to this man's house. He finally let me out after like an hour or two, but stayed in the parking lot of my apartment almost the entire night and called me nonstop. About a month later, he texted me out of the blue a really long paragraph apologizing profusely and saying if I ever changed my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology and wished him well. Hope he's doing okay, but I wanted no part of that. Story 13. A few years ago, I went to a brewery to meet a guy on a date for the first time. The waiter began a conversation and asked me if I was expecting anyone else. I told him I was on a blind date and hadn't met the guy. The waiter asked me if I wanted to set up a code word. Since they didn't serve milk stouts, if I ordered one from him, he would know something is up and would call me back to have me sign the receipt instead. The waiter kept checking on me frequently. Eventually, I did order a milk stout. When it came time for the bill, I asked for it to be split. My date put his drinks on my bill. When the waiter came back, he told me he had the drinks removed. It was on the house. When my date asked me what that was all about, I told him the waiter had told me there was something wrong with my card, so I needed to go to bar with him. I waited a while and then left for my car. The date was still there. He made a comment about how he was waiting for a goodbye hug. I told him no thank you and that my car was in the opposite direction. Moments later, he sent me horrendous text messages and thank you, John. You may have saved my life that day. Story 14. After a few dates, he started to get way too serious. I told him calmly and honestly that I wasn't ready for a serious relationship and he deserved to be with someone who was. He completely flipped shit, and after a bit of name-calling, I stood up and started to leave the bar. He then said, "You should watch yourself in the future, especially when getting into your car." I was extremely paranoid for months after. Would check my back seat and under my vehicle. Never saw him again, so just an empty threat, but not a fun time. That was like 15 years ago. Yeah, he's still single. Story 15. Used to work in a small store, and this creepy dude would try to flirt with me. I guess it was twice a week. He seemed like someone who didn't have any friends and never socialized. But one day he asked for my number, and it wasn't aggressive, but pretty straightforward, so I was like, sure, I guess. Thought he was weird, but he knew where I worked, so I couldn't really reject him because there was no way of knowing how he would react. So I had to keep talking to him from time to time to make sure he didn't flip shit on me since I worked at night. After like a few weeks of occasional short text convos, like maybe 2 or 3 few-word texts, he asked how old I was, and he finally stopped talking to me because he was disgusted that I was 24 years old. He thought I was only 16. He was 28. He was a pedophile.